Hey there, Mama. You're listening to the Lift the Shame podcast. I'm your host, Crystal, mama of 5 and your family's intuitive eating dietitian, here to help you cut through the diet culture clutter so you can enjoy freedom with food as a family. I'm on a mission to help you end the generational legacy of diet culture in your home so you can experience motherhood free from food guilt and body shame. Listen in weekly for guidance on how you can ditch diet culture, heal your relationship with food and your body, and confidently raise intuitive eaters. Let's dive in and lift the shame together. Welcome back to the show, Mama. I'm so glad that you're here. I know we're full swing into the holiday season and that can bring up a lot of added stressors and pressure. So I just appreciate you taking some time to tune in and hope that today's episode will be helpful and encouraging for you. So we are pivoting a little bit. I feel like I have so many topics that I'm excited to talk about and share about with you. And I know it might seem like we're kind of bouncing around from one subject to another, but I am going to pivot a little bit just to talk about holiday sweets and kids, because I know just from conversations with many of you that this can feel like an area of concern. And the holidays seems to ramp that up. You know, if we think about the accessibility to sweets that our kids have right now, it's definitely more frequently than usual. I know with my kids, they're having a lot of holiday parties and different activities that revolve around sweets in one shape or form. And so if you are feeling just some pressure or stress around that, I really just want to give you some tips to help encourage you and ultimately support your kiddos through this season in a positive way that really allows them to learn how to eat sweets and all foods really in a way that feels best in their bodies. So we are going to dive right in. I have 5 tips for you to help support you with navigating holiday sweets with your kiddos. And my tip number 1 here is just checking in with yourself and being aware of your mindset and any discomfort that may be coming up for you around this. So, you know, I just want to acknowledge again that this can be hard. Sweets often is that one area that seems to push a lot of parents' buttons or just bring up a lot of discomfort. And there's good reason for that. Many of us grew up with, sweets being something that was put on a pedestal, or maybe that wasn't offered very frequently or was used as rewards. So if you have a complicated relationship or history with sweets, just know that that is likely showing up and also playing a role in how you're approaching sweets with your own kids. And diet culture continues to be the backdrop through which we are feeding our children and raising our families. And, ultimately the goal is to support you in a way that helps you feel empowered to kind of break out of that diet culture clutter so that you are able to do what is best for your kids without having, all that distraction in your own mind. But I also just want to recognize that it's still there, and many people that we love and engage with are very entrenched in diet culture, and that can be really challenging when other people are questioning our approaches or how we're navigating sweets with our kids. And this is very true during the holiday season when we are seeing people that we haven't maybe seen before or seen in a while. Everyone feels like they can offer their unsolicited opinion on how we're raising our children. And that can feel really uncomfortable and maybe cause you to question yourself and how you're feeding your kids, or am I doing the right thing by letting them eat sweets or keeping these sweets in my home? Because again, diet culture demonizes sugar and has painted this picture that can make it very confusing to stick to your guns, so to say, and really follow through with what you want to do. And that's where I really just want to encourage you again to be aware of when distress or discomfort is coming up for you around how you're feeding your kids, or if you find yourself questioning yourself or feeling uncomfortable with the volume of sweets that your child may be eating or the frequency of sweets that they're eating. All of this can cause some questions and feelings to come up for you. So I want to encourage you to be aware of that and learn how to best manage what's coming up for you. And first, just getting curious about it too. We can't shame ourselves into helping our children in a more productive and compassionate way. So when you can analyze what's coming up for you from a more curious lens, like, I wonder why I'm feeling this way about my kiddo eating their fourth cookie. Like, what is there for me? And being aware of those feelings and emotions and learning to manage those on your own can really help prevent you from projecting those things onto your children. Because what tends to happen here is we unconsciously, again, communicate certain messages to our kids about food and their bodies based on our mannerisms and our emotions and our feelings. And kids are so smart and really are sponges in how they pick up how we're feeling and what's coming up for us. And we want to, as much as possible, give our kids space to learn how to eat in a manner that doesn't, throw any shade or judgment at them. And again, we do not do that intentionally. It often happens unconsciously. And the biggest way I see that happening unconsciously is when we are not aware of what's coming up for us and we're not managing it. We're not managing our own discomfort. And so I just want to encourage you as you're going through this holiday season and navigating a higher volume of sweets with your kids, just be aware there may be some discomfort coming up for you. You may have some lingering, feelings about sweets, about your kids eating sweets. And I want you to just be aware of it and think about, am I communicating certain messages to my kids about their bodies or about the foods that they like and enjoy eating through my own discomfort? There's so much power in looking at our reoccurring thoughts. We've chatted about this before on the podcast about how so many of our thoughts are just automatic. Like we just replay the same things over and over. And I just want to invite you into a time where you can challenge some of those old narratives that are no longer serving you or serving your kids or serving the values that you have or the goals that you have to raise intuitive eaters who have a neutral relationship with food and are able to trust their body as the best guides of what they need. And that really starts by examining those thoughts and beliefs that are still surfacing for you. One of the common ones that I hear that I'll touch on really quickly is this idea that that's too much sugar. This happens a lot where we're like, there's no way that they can still keep eating, the holiday cookies and the Christmas candy and the candy canes, like all of it is just adding up and it's just too much sugar. That is a common old narrative that often surfaces. And a lot of us grew up hearing those same things said to us. You can't have that. That's too much sugar. You've already had too much. And so, be aware of those mindsets that are circulating. And I just want you to think about this idea of too much sugar and just remembering that you are not the one living in your child's body, right? Like so often we, out of good intention, think that we know best. And we do in certain ways, right? In certain areas, we do know best because we have more life experience. But when it comes to embodiment, in terms of like your child being in touch with their own body cues, there are things that we don't know. We don't know what amount of sugar feels good in our kids' bodies. And what we do want to do is provide opportunities for them to learn and experience what feels good and what doesn't, because they're not going to learn that through us telling them. It's something that has to be experienced. And so that brings me to my second tip here, which is offering more opportunities and more frequency within structure. I think sometimes this can get misconstrued to mean just let your kids eat whatever they want all day long, no holds bar, free reign of the fridge and pantry, just go for it. And that's definitely not what I'm communicating. I really believe and stand on this belief that kids do best with structure and predictability around their eating times. And we will definitely have some more upcoming episodes around this topic in particular. But within that structure, we want to be super intentional and proactive about providing opportunities for our kids to have sweets. I talked a little bit about this during our Halloween sweets episodes. But one thing to consider is a higher exposure to sweets often needs to be matched with a higher frequency to eat those sweets. So we tend to do the opposite. When our kids have more exposure to sweets, we want to kind of rein it in and limit how much they do get to eat, because we're like, it feels counterintuitive, right? Like they're getting so many sweets and so many opportunities. The reality is, though, when they're getting sweets more frequently, they really need to have more opportunities to be able to eat those, because it's in their mind. Like when they're seeing kids at school eat certain things, or, they just went to a holiday party and got a whole bag full of Christmas cookies. They tend to fixate on it. Like, ooh, this is super exciting, and I can't wait to eat these. And if they're matched with us not giving those opportunities for them to eat, that can cause them to fixate on those things even more. So what we want to do during times of higher exposure, we want to, again, match it with higher frequency. So that might look like letting your kids have some of those Christmas cookies multiple times a day with their meals and snacks, or letting them have some of those Christmas candies, or whatever it is that they're, really into. Whatever holiday sweets may be around that are more novel to them, those need to be integrated more frequently into their daily routine and into their daily life, so that they can trust, like, oh, these things that I've seen that I'm kind of excited about trying, there needs to be permission and opportunity to be able to have those things. So I want to encourage you to just look at kind of your normal routine right now with your meals and snacks with your kiddos, and ask yourself, are there some places in their routine where I can add these things more frequently? A lot of kids are going to be home more frequently now when they're off of school for break. So it may take some more intentionality to figure out, where can I plug this in? Where can I help them understand that they do get access to these things? They're not scarce, they're not forbidden, and that will help your child relax about them more, especially with consistency in this approach. And again, piggybacking on this particular topic to our next tip. So tip number 3 is to consider offering sweets to your child without them having to ask. So often it's our kids having to ask us, like, can I have some more, cookies, or can we have this, or can we have that? And sometimes our kids are pestering or asking so insistently because they may not feel or trust that those things will be available. And if we can kind of beat them to the punch and ask them before they have to ask us, that can communicate such a powerful message to our kids that not only are those things available, but we trust them to eat them. And it really helps normalize it too. Again, when our kids are constantly asking, and if we're saying no a lot of the times, like if we're saying no, not right now, no, we can't have that, no, you just had that. When they're constantly met with those responses, it can, again, cause them to fixate more on the novel sweets that are around, which right now is those holiday sweets. So I want you to think about how you can surprise your kids. They will love it. And just ask them, at a random snack or mealtime that they wouldn't expect, asking them like, hey, this is what we're having. And, cookies are also available on the menu right now. Would you like some cookies to go with what we're having to eat? And just be really nonchalant about it, maintain your cool, and just offering and providing without them having to ask if they can have access to that particular sweet. This, again, can be such a powerful tip and strategy because we don't always want to wait to offer until our kids are asking us. So kind of switching that approach, again, will communicate some really powerful messages to your kids about these foods that they're excited about eating. So tip number 4 here is, again, we've talked a little bit about this, but really giving your kids unconditional permission and trust to eat what they need from the foods that you've provided. I know this one can be really hard because it's a layered topic and it's a layered conversation. And so many of us have a hard time trusting our kids because we never learn to trust ourselves when it comes to food. A lot of us grow up hearing this messaging of, oh, I can't keep that in the house, or I'll just eat the whole thing, or, oh, there's no way I can keep those things around. And we unconsciously, again, like manifest the same type of environment and messaging to our kids where we're like, oh, I don't really trust, I can't buy that pack of Oreos because it'll be gone by the end of the day. Or we worry about having certain things in the home. We worry about how our kids might, act around having those foods in the home, or we just might not trust ourselves around eating certain foods. And so I want you to think about ways that you can really communicate either verbally or non-verbally, just unconditional permission and trust to your children. Because again, our kids can be trusted to eat. They do have an innate ability to self-regulate their intake. And sometimes those innate abilities get hidden by a feeling of scarcity around certain foods, especially sweets. So if in a child's mind, sweets feel scarce, that is going to override their innate ability to self-regulate those foods. So ideally, we want to give permission, make it accessible. And then this key piece here is trusting them to eat from the foods that we've provided. So that can look like if you are offering, let's say, cookies with dinner, you want to allow your child to eat what they want and what they need from those foods without having any rules or stipulations attached to that. So that means that there's no particular rule of what your child has to eat or what order they have to eat. Again, a lot of us grew up with this mindset or mentality that we have to eat our veggies first, or we have to take a bite of X before we can have Y. And again, that is counterintuitive for your child who is trying to listen to their body's cues. And we want them to be able to listen to what their body needs and eat what they want from the foods that we've provided without them having to think about an external set of rules that they need to follow. So you really want to give them full permission to enjoy and eat what they want from the foods that you're offering, even if that looks like they're just eating the dessert portion of their meal and not anything else. And again, be aware of the discomfort that's coming up for you in those situations, because that is for you to manage and not project onto your child. This is also a layered conversation. And I just want to say, I recognize that there's a lot of nuance here. And so if you have questions about this particular subject, please send them my way, because we will be having more conversations about this too. Okay. Last tip here, tip number 5, is just speaking neutrally about sweets and desserts in general. We, again, tend to have some old programming and messaging that I know so many of us are trying to unlearn that can inevitably come out when we are feeling triggered or when we feel uncomfortable with how our kids are eating. And I have seen this to be true, especially with sweets, where it's easy to say things like, you're going to make yourself sick if you eat too much of that. You've had enough. Too much of that isn't good for you. And this is really hard when our kids might be hearing these messages from other people, especially during the holidays when we're, again, engaging with other family members or friends who may not necessarily understand our approach to how we're, feeding our children. So I recognize that a lot of this may not be within your realm of control. But one thing I want you to consider is, what is the foundation that you're setting through your own language and narrative and how you talk about sweets at home? So, I really encourage parents to just think about speaking about sweets as neutrally as possible. And there's not good versus bad when it comes to food, because really all food can serve our body in some beneficial way. And when we can remove the categories around food, it helps our kids to be able to listen to their bodies, again, instead of forming external rules about what they should or shouldn't eat. So one really practical way that you can, create a neutral narrative around sweets is to not categorize it. We tend to just lump all sweets together and we call them sweets, we call them treats, we call them even desserts, right? Other languaging that we can use, like calling it junk food, sometimes food, fun food, play food. Like these are all ways that we categorize food. And what happens when we do that is we are elevating it in our child's mind without even intending to do so, because we're separating it into its own category. We're communicating to them that there's something special about this food that puts it into its own category. And so one way that you can just help normalize it is just eliminating categories from your languaging altogether. I recommend just calling sweets by what it is. So saying we're having cookies, we're having candy canes, we are having, donuts, whatever it is called, just call that food by its name. And that can really help normalize it for your child and help them, again, learn to tune into what their body is needing versus eating for any external rules. So that can be one practical way that you can start with that. Another thing in regards to speaking about sweets and just our languaging around sweets is how we respond to our kids' requests for them. So again, when they're always asking or saying, can I have this? Can I have that? And if we're saying no, or you've already had enough, again, those phrases can make those sweets actually more desirable and make them more kind of obsessive around having them. And again, I'm not saying that the solution is to just say yes all the time. Like, I do think it's important to have, healthy boundaries with our kids around food and sweets, and supporting them and building a healthy relationship with food does not mean always giving in to every single request that they have. Again, there is a middle ground. This is definitely a gray area. We want to be responsive to what our kids need as much as possible and attuned to the foods that they're showing a high interest in and making those accessible within their eating structure. With that said, I do think it's important to be careful around languaging, specifically with sweets, because if our kids are always hearing us say no, that can create more obsessiveness around them. So I have a little technique that I like to use that's called leading with a yes. So it means that when your kid is asking you for sweets in that moment, right? Like, let's say it's between, it's almost dinner time and your kid's rummaging in the pantry and really wanting a holiday sweet that they just received. I really want this. Can I have this, mama? So, we want to acknowledge and validate their request, and we want to reassure them that that food is always going to be part of their future. And then what we can do is to defer to an upcoming eating time. So that can look like, like that Christmas candy that you got from that party is really yummy and delicious. We are going to have some of that with dinner coming up soon. So again, we want to validate their requests. We don't want to say, no, it's about the candy. You've already had too much. Again, those things can create some confusing messages around those foods. We're saying yes to the request. We're just deferring it to a different time. So that can be a really helpful technique to assure your child that more is coming. Another thing you want to do with this is use events throughout your child's day versus time. Time can be really hard for a lot of kids to conceptualize. Developmentally, they don't have those cognitive abilities yet to understand that we're going to have that later. They may not really understand what that means to a child. That can add anxiety to when they're going to have the sweets because they don't understand when it's coming. So what you can do instead to help them understand when more opportunities are coming is to use events during your day instead of time. So that can look like, yes, we are going to have some cookies with our snack after we come back from the library, or after we go to the park and we come home and have our snack, we will have some more cookies then. So when you can help your child understand, okay, this is where it's coming, this is the timeline of my day, that really helps to subside any anxiety they might have around uncertainty of when they're going to get those sweets that they're really excited about. So keep those ideas in mind when you're just considering your language around talking to your child about their sweets, especially if you're getting a lot of requests during this holiday season. So this is just one last little bonus tip here when we're thinking about sweets. Again, these conversations are so layered, and I know it's easy to talk about strategies and I also just want to make sure that I'm addressing a lot of the deeper layers that are here that are showing up too. And that looks like our own relationship with food and understanding that this absolutely plays a role in how we feed our kids and the approaches that we're taking and what's coming up for us. There's so many things happening in these situations and these feeding, engagements with our kids. And, sometimes strategy can only take you so far. And I just want to encourage you to go gently with yourself and also give yourself permission to enjoy some of these holiday sweets with your kids as well. I know if you've had a history of a tumultuous relationship with food in any shape or form, that holidays can be very triggering, that they can be a more challenging time, especially food-centered and food-focused holidays, which this time of year certainly is. And so I just want to encourage you to go gently with yourself, give yourself some compassion, be aware of what you're needing too, because your needs matter. And ultimately, our kids are learning most from what they see us modeling, right? And it can be so powerful for our kids when they see us enjoying and partaking in some of these holiday sweets too. I think, it's so common to let our kids eat certain things, but not extend that same permission to ourselves. And I just want to invite you to consider partaking in something with your child that may really mean a lot to them and just communicate a really powerful message like, oh, I see mommy eating that too. It must really be okay. I'm safe to eat that. It really helps our kids internalize this feeling of safety and trust within their own bodies. And so I want to just share that tip with you. I know that can be easier said than done, but think about some ways that you can join the fun and enjoy it with your kids. I know it can be stressful, but I want you to think about how you can reclaim some of the joy that should be part of food and sharing that joy with your children to really experience this freedom with food as a family. I hope this is helpful for you. I know it's a lot of information packed into a short episode, but I would love to hear just how you're doing, how you're navigating the holidays. Don't forget, you can connect with me over on Instagram at Crystal Cargis. You can also send me an email to hello@crystalcargis.com. Let me know what questions you have if you're feeling stuck on any of these points. Or if you have any topics for suggestion for future episodes, I would love to hear from you too. And, continue to use this as a resource that's just helpful for you as you navigate your own motherhood journey. So as always, thank you so much for being here and for spending this time with me today. And we are going strong through the holidays. So definitely come back next week. We'll be having some more topics on navigating this holiday season for yourself and for your kiddos. So until then, my friend, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Lift the Shame podcast. For more tips and guidance on your motherhood journey, come connect with me on Instagram at Crystal Cargis. Until next week, Mama, I'll be cheering you on. Bye for now.